They rolled their eyes when she showed up in a worn uniform, assuming she was just another retired clerk. But when the general glanced at her ID and froze, the room fell silent. He uttered only 2 words. Codename, Eclipse? She wasn't just another veteran. She was the Black Ops operative whose missions were still classified, and whose name once meant extraction, not paperwork. If this story gripped you from the first line, like and subscribe to Endless Stories, where forgotten heroes get the spotlight they deserve. Turn on the bell so you never miss a tale that changes how you see service and sacrifice. The rain hadn't let up all morning, slapping hard against the gate guard's poncho as he leaned forward to inspect the ID in his hand. He didn't even look up. "You're not on the list, ma'am." The woman standing in front of him was soaked from the collar down. Her black boots, worn and scuffed, had clearly seen better days. She didn't argue, just waited. The guard gave a half-shrug. "Sorry. Veteran ceremonies for prior combat personnel or decorated retirees. Says here you worked logistics." She finally spoke. Calm, low, and unshaken. "Clearance Echo 7. Authorization code. Sierra 9 Eclipse." That made him pause, but not for long. He blinked at the old laminated ID again, unimpressed. "We still can't let anyone through without an escort. I can call someone to—" "I'll wait," she said. The guard muttered something under his breath and turned toward the booth, radioing in. The rain poured harder, tracing lines down the weathered insignia on her sleeve. Her hair was cut short, her face sharp but tired, the kind of tired that doesn't fade with rest. Behind her, a civilian car idled in the lot, steam rising from the hood. 15 minutes passed, then 20. She stood in silence, hands behind her back, posture as upright as ever. Finally, the radio on the guard's belt crackled. "Let her in. Escort to Building D, General's orders." The guard's eyes narrowed. "The General? Repeat. Building D. Escort now." He stiffened. When he turned back to her, something in his expression had shifted. "Follow me, ma'am." She nodded once. They walked across the wet tarmac in silence. Base personnel moved past them, barely glancing. She moved like someone who had memorized every inch of this place long ago. Not one step out of rhythm. Building D was a squat, concrete thing, no markings, no windows. 2 soldiers stood at the entrance. As the guard gestured for her to proceed, the doors opened from the inside. Waiting there, in a neatly pressed uniform, was a man with 4 silver stars on his shoulder. General Halston, 63 years old, decorated, feared, the kind of leader who didn't shake hands unless it mattered. He stepped forward, slowly, and stopped just 2 feet from her. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at her face. Then he looked down at her chest, not at the medals but at a patch, faded, almost invisible. His lips moved, barely above a whisper. "Codename, Eclipse?" Silence. Then she nodded. The air between them felt like it might snap from tension. Halston stepped back half a pace, his jaw clenched. "Everyone out," he barked. The soldiers obeyed instantly. When they were alone, the general exhaled sharply and looked her in the eyes. "They told me you were dead. I was. On paper. Jesus Christ." He walked slowly around her, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the myth he remembered. She stood still, unblinking. "I read your file," he said finally. "At least the parts they let me see. 6 covert deployments. 3 rescues behind enemy lines. No official recognition. No photos. No confirmation. That was the point. Why come here now?" She reached into her coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. "No name, no markings. Just wait. For your eyes only." Halston hesitated, then took it. His hand trembled. Inside was a single photo, black and white. It showed a small girl in a village courtyard, clinging to a stuffed bear. In the background, fire and smoke. And in the corner, barely visible, the silhouette of a soldier pulling 2 wounded civilians toward a waiting chopper. "Uzbekistan, 1997, she said. "Operation Night Window." Halston looked up sharply. We lost contact with the evac team. They said everyone died. Not everyone. He lowered the photo slowly, staring at her again. Why now? Because what's buried doesn't stay buried forever. And someone's rewriting the history books. He nodded once, slowly. You're not here for medals. She didn't answer. You're here for the truth. Again, no reply, but her eyes said everything. Outside, the storm eased into a quiet drizzle. But inside Building D, the air had never felt heavier. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a reckoning. And the general had just remembered why her codename had been classified for 25 years. General Halston's office was nothing like the marble-floored grandeur you'd expect from a 4-star commander. It was sparse, functional. Just a desk, 2 chairs, a steel file cabinet, and a map of global military deployments pinned across one wall. But what it lacked in polish, it made up for in presence. Like the man who occupied it, he motioned toward the seat across from his desk. Sit, please. She did quietly. Her movements were efficient, controlled. The only sound in the room was the drip of rain off his boots. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and slid it across the desk. I always kept this one for senior intel. Figured you'd earned it 10 times over. She didn't touch it, just looked at the cup, then at him. You really want to go back into this, don't you? He asked. You know the kind of doors this opens, and what it invites in. I never left, she said. The world just stopped looking. He studied her face again, almost like trying to place a name over a ghost. In truth, she hadn't aged like most people. Her skin bore the wear of harsh climates, dehydration, sun exposure, but her eyes, they carried the weight of too much remembered detail. Eyes that had watched men disappear in jungle smoke and waited for helicopters that never came. You're not here for recognition, he said finally. No, you're here because something's wrong. She reached into her coat again and slid a flash drive across the desk. This came through a back channel 2 weeks ago. There's a list, names, dates, cover-ups. Most are blacked out, but one jumped out at me. Operation Silver Wind. Halston froze. That's buried 6 levels down. Even I only saw the aftermath. Exactly, she said. But someone's resurrecting it. Not for truth. For control. He inserted the drive into his encrypted laptop. A screen blinked to life. No colors. Just gray text and deep shadows. She leaned forward and pointed to one name on the list. Commander Alton Veers. Last seen, Riyadh. Current location. Undisclosed. He's not dead, she said. And he's not hiding. He's working for someone. Halston leaned back slowly in his chair. Veers was your handler on Eclipse missions. He was also the one who signed the order to erase me. And now he's back. Or never left. Halston closed the laptop, pressing both palms over the lid like holding down something dangerous. Why not go straight to Intel Command? He asked. They won't touch this. The names on that list? Some are wearing medals. Some are giving orders. So what do you need from me? I need access to files you still have clearance for. I need airspace, sat links, and I need someone to look me in the eye and say I'm not crazy. Halston's mouth tightened into a hard line. He stood and walked to the window, watching the drizzle smear against the glass like static. You were always a ghost in the system, he said softly. A weapon without a country. Even when you came back, we didn't know how to handle you. I was never asking to be handled, she said. Just trusted. He turned back. His voice was low but firm. And if what you're chasing leads to someone still in power? Then they should have erased me better. For a long time, neither of them said a word. The weight of decisions past, and the echo of missions long denied, hovered between them. Halston finally opened a drawer, pulled out an old keycard and a file with no markings. He slid them across the table. Restricted clearance to Vault 7, he said. You'll find what you need inside. But if you walk through that door, there's no going back. She pocketed the card, stood slowly, and for the first time in 26 years, offered a salute. Halston didn't hesitate. He returned it sharp and steady. As she turned to leave, he said one last thing. Codename Eclipse. Welcome back. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just walked through the door, coat swinging behind her like the last page of a dossier no one was meant to reopen. But she was open now. And someone out there was about to remember why her name had once been whispered only in classified rooms and emergency briefings. The reckoning had begun. Vault 7 wasn't on the map. Not even to most in command. It sat beneath a decommissioned communications outpost somewhere in Northern Virginia, hidden behind a steel hatch that looked more like a utility door than the entrance to a secret archive. Eclipse stood in front of it now. The keycard Halston had given her slick with condensation in her gloved hand. She glanced up at the old satellite dish above her, long since rusted and pointed uselessly at a sky that no longer listened. This place hadn't received a signal in decades, but inside, it stored everything no one wanted found. The keycard reader blinked once, then again. Finally, a dull click. She exhaled slowly and stepped inside. The air was cold and dry. The lights buzzed weakly, casting a gray glow over rows of shelves and secure drawers labeled only by code. No names, no labels, just secrets. She moved with purpose, her boots echoing across the concrete floor. Vault 7 wasn't about aesthetics. It was about hiding truth in plain sight, behind bad lighting and buried protocols. In the back corner, exactly where she remembered it might be, was file set 47 Delta. The only record she hadn't been able to scrub when she'd disappeared. She opened the drawer with a grunt and pulled a single thick binder. The cover was cracked, the pages inside yellowed, but the ink still screamed. She flipped past the familiar operations. Desert Thorn, Black River, Ember Ghost, until she found what she came for. Silver Wind. The pages were heavily redacted. Most of the text had been blacked out, but what remained was enough. Veers had signed off on a transport manifest 2 days before the mission. Not to a known outpost, but to a private landing strip in Moldova. No military oversight, no satellite logs. She traced her gloved finger along the name of one asset on that transport. Herein. Not a soldier, a civilian scientist. And beside it, a handwritten note in the margin. Package secured. Eclipse not informed. Her jaw tightened. They had sent her into that mission blind. Not just about the objective, but about the real reason it was happening at all. It wasn't about hostages. It was about extraction of someone valuable, of something they didn't want her to see. A sudden noise behind her broke the silence. A footstep. She didn't turn, just spoke clearly. You're late. The figure stepped out from the shadows. Medium build, dark civilian clothes, sunglasses despite the low light. He removed them slowly, revealing gray eyes that once belonged to a man who used to pass her orders from dark corners of safehouses across Europe. Agent Rourke, CIA liaison, officially retired. Unofficially, no one knew. You weren't supposed to come back, he said. And yet, she replied flatly. Here I am. He glanced down at the file in her hands. That's not a good folder to be touching. You made it easy to find. I made it disappear, he said. Not well enough. They stared at each other, still, like two statues locked in a standoff neither wanted to break first. Then Rourke stepped forward. You're poking into places that got people buried in the desert. What do you think you'll find? The truth. There is no truth, he said almost sadly. Only stories that keep the lights on. Then I'll blow a fuse. He gave a soft chuckle. Still got that fire. You always did run hot. Only when someone lies. Rourke looked away, then back. I'm not here to stop you, he said. But I am here to warn you. Veers isn't who you remember. He's changed. He was always a manipulator. Not just that. He's protected now. Private networks. Black shields. Mercs. He doesn't answer to anyone. Not even the flag. Then I won't go through the front door. You're not going to get close. Not without help. Eclipse tucked the folder under her coat. I don't need help. You will. There was something in Rourke's voice. Not a threat. Something closer to worry. Almost regret. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small slip of paper. No name, just a burner number. Call this when you realize you can't go alone. I never could, she said. But I always did. As she walked past him and toward the exit, Rourke's voice followed her like a whisper. They already know you're looking, Eclipse. They never forgot you. They just hoped the world had. She didn't look back. They'd tried to erase her. But some ghosts come back louder than ever. The motel was the kind of place no one asked questions. Just a key slid across a cracked counter, a flickering neon sign outside humming through the night, and a room that smelled faintly of bleach and dust. Eclipse dropped her bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands, steady as they were in the field, now trembled slightly. Not from fear, from memory. Operation Silver Wind had been the moment it all began to unravel. She had believed it was a rescue op. Intel said a hostage cell deep in an off-grid Moldovan bunker. The team was lean. No backup. She'd led the entry herself. But when they breached the compound, the captives weren't soldiers. They were scientists, and they weren't afraid, they were waiting. Two had disappeared the moment extraction started. One of them, Herein, was never listed in the mission report. And that small, quiet detail had haunted her ever since. She took out the file again, flipping to the note she hadn't shown Halston. The second page had a map, an abandoned airfield in the northern Balkans. Marked, inactive. But she knew better. If Veers had rerouted assets there once, chances were high he had done it again. She pulled a burner phone from her coat and dialed the number Rourke had given her. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, gravelly, familiar. You're early. I don't have time to wait, she replied. Where? Bucharest. I'll send coordinates. A pause. Then, I'll bring the others. Click. She sat for a long moment in the dark, the only sound the hum of the AC unit coughing through the vents. She knew what calling him meant. It meant going back to the field, not as a ghost but as a target. Before dawn, she was already en route. No trace, no signal. Just a rented car with fake plates and her gear in the trunk. The road to Romania was long and winding, cutting through fog-covered hills and into cities that never made the news. She kept to the shadows, always scanning her mirrors. Her instincts had never dulled, even after all these years. The silence in her rear view said she was still ahead of the storm, but not by much. She met Rourke at an abandoned train yard outside the capital. With him were two others, Valdez, former NSA cryptographer turned freelance signal hacker, and Carter, a former airborne medic who owed her his life. They exchanged no greetings, just nods. That was all that was needed. The coordinates lead here, Valdez said, handing her a SAT tablet. Thermal says minimal activity, but something's jamming satellite view. Classic Veers, she muttered. Hiding in plain sight. Carter spoke for the first time. You really think he's still there? After all these years? I think he's done hiding, she said. And I think we're the only ones not pretending he doesn't exist. Rourke leaned against the side of the van. We're not getting close without a plan. Guards, drones, private security. It's not just a bunker anymore. It's a fortress. She looked out over the fence toward the distant silhouette of the old airfield. Then we don't go in loud. We go in like ghosts. Valdez smirked. Back to old habits. She gave the faintest nod. One last time. That night they moved under cloud cover. No lights, no noise, just boots on wet ground and breath in sync. Eclipse led them to the northern fence line, where Valdez disabled the perimeter sensors. They slipped through a break in the wire, crawling until they reached a drainage culvert beneath the airfield's tarmac. From there, they entered an old maintenance tunnel that hadn't seen use since the Cold War. At the end of that tunnel, a steel door. She placed her hand on the metal and closed her eyes. 26 years ago, she'd walked through another door like this. Then, she thought she was saving lives. Now she knew better. She cracked it open. The hall beyond was dim, washed in red emergency lighting. Echoes moved like shadows on the walls. They advanced in formation, every step purposeful, every breath rehearsed. A room ahead, glass walls, Inside, monitors, maps, and a single man seated at a console. Commander Veers. He looked older, thinner, but his posture hadn't changed. Still arrogant, still calm. He didn't flinch when the door opened. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. She stepped inside alone. "You left too many loose threads," she said. Veers turned slowly in his chair. "You always were the most persistent. I admired that. You erased me. I saved you. You think they'd have let you live if they knew what we brought out of Moldova?" She said nothing, just stared. He stood, walked around the console. His voice softened. "Eclipse. We were soldiers, but we were also assets. And sometimes, assets get repurposed." Her jaw clenched. "What did you do with the scientists?" "They're not important. They were human beings. They were leverage." And with that word, everything changed. Behind her, the team moved. Carter secured the hall. Valdez locked the doors. Rourke uploaded everything from the servers. Veers only smiled. "You're too late," he said. "Maybe," she replied, stepping closer. "But you're no longer invisible." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Recognition. He understood. His past had returned. Not in a courtroom. Not with headlines. But in the form of the one soldier they had failed to silence. Codename Eclipse. And she had come to finish what they started. Veers was silent as Eclipse stepped forward. The old fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting ghost-like shadows against the sterile concrete walls. For a moment, all that separated the two operatives, one forgotten, the other hidden, was the weight of what had never been said. Her boots stopped inches from his, her hand still close to the holster at her side. But this wasn't about a bullet. Not yet. "You made me the villain," she said quietly, her voice as steady as it had been the night she vanished. "You didn't just erase my name. You left me to rot while you got promoted." Veers tilted his head, almost amused. "I didn't expect you to survive Moldova. That makes two of us." He took a step back and moved toward a sidewall lined with locked cases. As he tapped a sequence into the panel, a drawer slid open with a faint hiss. Inside, a collection of hard drives and sealed documents. He pulled one out and tossed it onto the metal table between them. It slid, spinning slightly before stopping near her hand. "That," he said, "is what you're really after. Not revenge. Not justice. You want the truth." Eclipse didn't move. She didn't need to. She could feel Carter and Rourke behind the door, waiting for her signal. But this moment was hers alone. "What's on it?" she asked. Veers walked to the window and looked out at the old airfield, a pale moon rising above the cracked asphalt. "The names, the deals, the black money, every op we ran without oversight, the ghosts we made." Her brow tightened. "Why are you giving it to me?" He turned, and for the first time she saw it. A hint of weight in his shoulders. Fatigue. Not physical, moral. "Because I'm done. They replaced me already. I'm just another liability now. You're not here to destroy me. You're here to bury what we were." "You think this redeems you?" Veers gave a small, humorless laugh. "I don't care about redemption. But if one of us is going to survive the aftermath, it should be you." Before she could respond, a voice crackled over her earpiece. Carter's voice.
Urgent.
"Eclipse, we've got movement outside. SUVs. Unmarked. Fast." Her heart kicked. She grabbed the drive, stuffed it inside her coat, and locked eyes with Veers. "You called for backup?" He shook his head. "Wasn't me. You weren't the only one tracking ghosts." The lights suddenly went red. Alarm silent, but flashing. Valdez's voice followed. "They're jamming comms. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this place is sealed." Eclipse moved to the door and signaled the team. Veers didn't follow. He just stood there, a relic in a room built on lies. She stopped, looked back. "You coming?" "No," he said simply. "I've done enough." The look in his eyes said everything. He was handing off the story, passing the weight that had crushed him for decades. Eclipse nodded once, curt, sharp, the same way she had saluted before every classified mission. Then she ran. The team moved fast, down the tunnels and through the maintenance corridor. Valdez had mapped the fallback exit near the old fuel tanks, an escape route no longer registered in satellite archives. Carter covered their flank, his eyes sweeping for hostiles. Eclipse didn't look back. Not until the roar of an explosion lit up the night sky behind them. The airfield was engulfed in fire. Vault 7 gone in a flash of light and betrayal. Whether Veers lit the fuse himself or someone else did it, she didn't know. But his story had ended right where hers had restarted. The drive was safe inside her coat, but it felt heavier than steel. They rendezvoused at a safe house just outside the border. No questions. No celebration. Just silence, the kind that followed every operation that wasn't supposed to happen. Valdez was already working on cracking the encrypted files. Carter passed her a black coffee and a nod. Rourke said nothing. He knew better than to break a moment Eclipse needed for herself. As dawn broke over the distant hills, she sat alone by the window. The sunlight caught a crack in the pane, casting a thin golden line across her face. Her eyes remained still, locked on the horizon. They'd tried to bury her name. They'd written her off as just a woman, unworthy of remembrance. But the truth didn't fade. It waited, and now it had a voice again. Back in the States, Eclipse became someone else again. She tucked the Black Ops armor beneath a borrowed name, carried no weapon, and walked like someone no longer hunted. Because this time, she wasn't hiding. She was preparing. The drive had been decrypted in layers, each more damning than the last. Valdez had done his part. Now it was her turn. It wasn't just the file on Moldova. It was over 40 years of operations that never made it into the Pentagon's books. Names of agents buried alive in debt and silence. Private sector contracts that used the military as a shield. Intel swaps between rogue nations, and one name that showed up more than any other, General Weston Cray. The man who had signed her expulsion from the military in '99. The same man who once said, "Women don't break men's wars. They mop up after them." She hadn't forgotten, but what shook her wasn't his name. It was a line of encrypted requisitions he signed. One in particular, dated 6 months ago. An experimental project operating out of a repurposed naval base in South Carolina. Code-named Widow's Shield. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew Cray's hands were on it. She packed light, just like she had in the old days. A new ID, a forged clearance badge, a backup phone routed through a Canadian relay, and inside a small steel case, a badge long thought burned with her record. An emblem, silver and sharp-edged, bearing the faint call sign E9X Eclipse. The plan wasn't infiltration. Not this time. She was going to walk straight through the front door. The naval base was a sprawl of concrete and glass. Modern. Intimidating. Lines of recruits marching across the yard, their voices echoing with discipline. She walked across the compound in civilian clothes, head high, eyes forward. Some noticed her. None stopped her. Until she reached the checkpoint to Sector 9. A young officer stepped in her path. Not hostile, just trained. "Sorry, ma'am. That area's restricted." Eclipse didn't flinch. She handed over the forged badge and waited. The officer glanced at it, blinked. His hand hovered near his radio. Then his brow furrowed. He stepped aside. "You're clear to proceed, ma'am." Sector 9 was quiet, sterile, the kind of place where secrets echo too loudly. She followed the hall, turned past a mirrored corridor, and stopped at a door marked Research Access, Level Black. She swiped the badge. The door clicked open. Inside, a room bathed in cool white light. Computers hummed. Digital maps covered one wall. At the center stood a man in a pressed uniform, silver stars gleaming on his collar. General Cray. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable at first. Then his gaze landed on the emblem pinned to her lapel. His jaw tensed. His pupils widened. A fraction of a second, that's all, but she saw it. Recognition. "Codename Eclipse," he said, like a ghost speaking aloud for the first time. She didn't smile. "You filed my dishonorable discharge, General." He gave a half-smirk. "That was a long time ago." She stepped forward, her boots echoing softly on the floor. And yet here we are. You, me, and 40 years of silence breaking all at once. Cray's voice remained low, but sharp. You came back to threaten me? No, she said. I came to tell you the reckoning's begun. And your name is all over it. He walked to a drawer, pulled out a leather folder, and tossed it onto the desk. I figured this day might come. That's why I kept these. Inside were photographs, reports, not of her missions, but of what happened after she was erased. The teams lost, the data suppressed, and a letter never sent, stamped with her codename and the words mistake. I didn't want to end your career, he said, but command decided a woman with that kind of success was inconvenient, and I followed orders. Eclipse's face didn't change, but the crack had formed. She lifted the drive from her coat and placed it on the table. I have the orders now. Cray stared at the device. You going to leak it? No, she said. I don't need to, but I am going to make sure every name in that file gets their truth back. Every life wrecked because they trusted people like you. He leaned back, calculating. You're not going to get far. The system protects its own. She leaned closer, voice sharp. Then maybe it's time someone like me rewrote the system. She turned to leave, and as the door opened, he spoke again. Is this personal? She paused, looked back over her shoulder. No, General. This is overdue. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows over the compound. And in the reflection of the glass, she saw it. The woman they called washed up, walking straight into the light. The next chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. The press conference was unplanned. At least that's what the Department of Defense claimed. But everyone who sat in that room, rows of uniformed personnel, journalists, aides, even a few old veterans tucked in the back, knew something bigger was about to happen. The podium stood silent at first, a blank seal of authority behind it, flanked by 2 flags. Cameras were already rolling, live feeds humming. The public had caught wind of an internal shakeup involving black-budget operations, declassified files, and something they were now calling the Eclipse Protocol. No one had confirmed what it meant until she walked out. No name announced, no introduction, just the quiet footsteps of a woman in a simple black suit, the silver pin on her lapel reflecting the spotlights. Her face was calm, eyes steady, not with arrogance, but with earned weight. The room fell silent as she approached the mic. My name was erased 24 years ago, she said, but my mission never stopped. There was a pause, not from hesitation, but to let the words breathe. I was a shadow, one of many. We operated in places where rules bent, where outcomes mattered more than visibility. And when the politics turned, I was discarded, labeled unstable, unreliable, a risk to optics. Flashes from the cameras popped, but no one interrupted. Today, I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for acknowledgement. For every name in the files you'll find on the drive released this morning. Names of people who served in silence, who bled and vanished, who never made it to any wall or medal count. She reached into her pocket and placed a drive on the podium. This contains every operation I was ordered to forget. Every sacrifice scrubbed from official record. I'm giving it to the public, not to ignite chaos, but to ignite conscience. In the back of the room, General Cray sat beside 2 high-ranking officials. His jaw was tight, but he didn't speak. He didn't move, because he knew whatever came next, the age of hiding behind protocol had ended. After the press conference, she walked outside alone. A group of young recruits stood in line near the base gate, fresh uniforms, eyes wide with the kind of reverence only born from stories whispered behind closed doors. One of them, a woman barely 20, stepped forward. Ma'am, she said, nervous. Were you really codename Eclipse? She gave a small nod. The young recruit raised her hand in salute. Thank you. Eclipse returned the gesture. Make sure they don't forget again. Later that week, the story broke worldwide. Articles flooded the internet. Headlines blared, classified veteran exposes decades of silence. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Internal reviews launched. Cray was quietly removed from his post. But Eclipse didn't watch it unfold. She returned to her small apartment overlooking the edge of the bay. No press, no cameras, just the wind off the water and the comfort of silence not forced upon her. One morning, she opened a plain envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a single medal, one that had been requested by General Dalton himself, posthumous recognition for a mission never acknowledged. No ceremony, no speech, just a quiet note. For service beyond recognition. We remember now. She didn't hang it on the wall. She placed it in a small box with her old dog tags and closed the lid. Some stories don't need a spotlight. Just someone who refuses to let them stay buried. And as she watched a new generation take their oaths, Eclipse knew. She hadn't just reclaimed her name. She had reopened a door for others to walk through. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in honor, justice, and second chances. More stories like this are waiting to be told, and we're just getting started. Subscribe to Endless Stories for more true-hearted tales that restore faith in humanity.